Hi, I'm Justin. I am back with Deanna, the founder of Fluid Isometrics and Block Therapy. Welcome back, Deanna. Next question is maybe a hot topic for many and maybe goes against what we often think about. So when someone has an acute injury, right, conventional wisdom says to ice it, to compress it, to take down the pain, take down the inflammation. That may be changing for many people. We're starting to shift that perspective a bit. And you've been talking about that for a long time and how we can actually use inflammation to fully repair or heal an injury. Can you share a little bit more about this controversial idea?
Yeah, and years and years ago, it occurred to me, why would we do something that goes against the body's natural response? I mean, God created this incredible body that we have, and if inflammation is the first response to injury or stress, why would we want to stop that? Now, I understand why, because if we don't understand how to support inflammation properly, it can become stagnant because the body knows what it needs. So let's say I sprain my ankle and I have all this extra blood being sent there. And inflammation is just blood flow, right? I mean, like some people I think get caught up in the word. It's just blood flow. But if there's a gap in the system or an injury, a tear or a fracture, that's a gap. And the body's going to say, okay, I need to send more stuff because I need to rebuild that gap. The body doesn't want to have gaps. In fact, the second law of thermodynamics is nature abhors a gradient. When there's a gap in the system, nature's going to fill it in. So we have a sprain, I've torn my ligament, and I have a gap. The body's going to send every single thing that it needs to rebuild it because the body knows. We don't have to know what is exactly required. We just have to support the body's genius in repairing itself. If we ice that and we stop the inflammation from happening, then that gap is still there, but that gap's still going to get filled in. So now what happens is we start creating scar tissue. And scar tissue from either injury, surgery, and adhesions from negative posture over time block blood and oxygen flow to cells. So this becomes the problem. It's inflammation, in my view, is the gold. Scar tissue and adhesions are the root of all suffering in the body because they block blood flow. So we need to understand how to support the body's inflammatory process to allow the rebuilding. And that's through adding energy in, which can be the application of heat through the breath, and also through understanding how to support the openness of the channels from the breath down. So if, again, it's my ankle that I've sprained, I want to be working through my hip flexor, my leg, my knee, my calf, all the way down to the foot, so that the first thing that can happen is that all of the debris from the damage can be removed. Think of a car accident, like things get broken, there's debris everywhere. We want to clean that up. And then that creates the space for the blood to send all of the healing nutrients, the oxygen to that site to start rebuilding. And if we allow that process to take place and we support proper inflammation, then we are extremely efficient at healing. So the typical 6 weeks of a bone fracture doesn't make sense anymore when you understand how to utilize inflammation. And in fact, we have a couple of really cool YouTube videos of this. I just want to share the very first time I dealt with the fracture in this way. I had already dealt a ton with soft tissue damage and injury, but I hadn't worked yet with a fracture. But everything in the universe is a mirror of itself. I trusted the process. And an 18-year-old came into my clinic on day 6 after he had a very severe 4th metatarsal fracture. And he was the captain of a rugby team, and he was supposed to be playing 3 weeks from the day of his injury, and they told him not to weight bear for 4 weeks. So I saw him day 6, and I saw him 3 other times, and he played with no pain.
Wow.
So yeah, and I've got 4 videos on the YouTube channel showing what we did and his changes. And then that video attracted an 18-year-old soccer player. He flew in from New York after seeing this, and he had a Jones fracture, so that 5th metatarsal bone. He was in a boot, and he arrived on my doorstep 3 weeks after his fracture. And they told him that he was probably going to need to have a rod put in that bone. And that's one of the most common bones to fracture because it's the furthest away from the engine. So, the feet become cold first and start to go through deterioration first. So that's a very common area to fracture. So he arrives with a boot and a shoe. And you can see this on video. After that first day, he's walking fine. After day 2, he's actually bounding on both feet with no pain. Now, the comical thing was he arrived here without the other shoe because for 3 weeks he'd been wearing a boot. So he actually had to go to the store to buy a pair of shoes because he didn't have a shoe for his right foot.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And it goes again, it's like just taking a whole different perspective on supporting the body, supporting that process, and allowing the body to do what it needs to do. And wow, it's just incredible what can happen. So
it sure is. The body
awesome.
knows. Yeah. We just have to support the body. Yeah.
Exactly. And just going back to that flow piece, I was working with a client last night and working the hip flexor, and one was quite painful. The next one, she's like, wow, I really felt this opening and this rush of heat going down to my leg. So in 2 to 3 minutes, you get this opening of those channels. You're getting opening up for that debris to be removed, and then getting that blood flow back to where it needs to go. So awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll get into the next question.